Oh, we ain't got a barrel of money. Maybe we're ragged and funny, but we travel along, singing our song, side by side. We don't know what's coming tomorrow. Maybe it's trouble and sorrow, but we travel the road, sharing our load, side by side.
Through all kinds of weather, what if the sky should fall? Just as long as we're together, it doesn't matter at all.
When they've all had their quarrels and parted, we'll be the same as we started, just travelling along, singing our song, side by side. I'd like to introduce you to Tammy Heathfield.
Hello everybody, and I'd like to introduce you to David Heathfield.
And I'd like to tell you about Ray Heathfield, my dad. My dad, Ray, he sailed from Plymouth in 1940. He lived, we grew up in Barry in South Wales, but he joined the Royal Navy at the age of 19, and he was here in Plymouth for a matter of weeks, and he sailed away, and what he left behind, he remembered, was a vibrant city, buzzing. Union Street was alive, especially at night. And it was a historic city, wonderful old houses, a bit like here in the Barbican. But when he returned, a few years later, at the end of World War II, it was quite a different picture. Plymouth had been flattened. This afternoon, Tammy and I are going to tell some stories about what happened in Plymouth during the Second World War, particularly around the Blitz. They're stories that we found when we researched the People's War website. So they're stories of people remembering when they were young and what they remember. So people who are about your age and your age, who were much older but remembering what it was like when they were like you. My name is Desmond John Taylor. I lived in Mile House, or Mile House, as we call it here in Plymouth, Beaumont Street. And well, my family and I, we all lived with my sister and my mother and father. We had our house, and well, when the air raids were to be started in 1941, we knew they were coming, so we had an Anderson shelter, a bit like just in the other room there, a corrugated metal, sort of that shape, out in the garden. And we sat out under that when the air raid started. And we weren't allowed to have any light, so we just had one little candle burning, and we put a flower pot turned up over that, and that was all the light we had. So we couldn't be, but we used to put our hands like that, pretending it was warming us up. Not that it did, of course. But as a boy of your age, I found it all quite exciting. I didn't dream that I would ever be harmed. It was all a thrill, listening to the whistling of the bombs coming down and then the scrump of the explosions in the distance. And then one day in April there was a massive explosion in the air. It was an air mine, a parachute mine that exploded above Mile House, and it caused a lot of damage in many properties. And our house was badly damaged. And after that, my father, who worked at the docks, he said, well, no more, you're going to be staying here in Plymouth. It's far too dangerous. So he packed us off, and it was the first time I'd been in a car. So there's me, my sister, and my mother in a taxi going north out of Plymouth and out to Beer Alston. Do you know where that is? And Beer Alston, you do know where it is. There was a farm there that belonged to a family friend of ours, and we were to stay at the farm. Now, just to make it clear just how bad it was in Plymouth in April 1941, there were 5 particularly bad nights of air raids. 21st, 22nd, 23rd of April, and the following week there were 2 more. And in those 5 nights, the German bombers dropped 17 parachute mines, exploded above Plymouth, and then there were 1,140 high explosives, and there were tens of thousands of firebombs. And in those 5 nights, more than 2,000 fires were reported in Plymouth. 590 people lost their lives, 427 were detained in hospital, seriously wounded, and there were twice as many as that who were the walking wounded, who, there was no space for them in the hospital, so they had to be treated as outpatients. So it was all very severe. In fact, Plymouth was the worst bomb-damaged town or city in the whole country per head of population, if you were aware of that, because it being a naval port. So it was extreme. So fortunately we were on the farm, but I didn't think I was fortunate because I still had to go to school. Now in 1941, the school I went to, the boys' high school at Devonport, had been evacuated to Penzance. And my father didn't want us going all the way down there, as far away in the end of Cornwall. So he said, right, you stay on the farm. Well, I was going a 2-mile cycle ride uphill from the farm to the railway station. Then I had to get the train into Plymouth every morning, had to walk for half a mile, and then the emergency school, it wasn't like the old boys' school. And at lunchtime there were no school dinners, so I had to go to the British restaurant and most days I had beans on toast for my lunch for 9p. And then at the end of the day, all the way back out to Beer Elston and to the farm. So I found that quite hard going, really, being a boy. Well, anyway, end of the summer. I have to tell you what it was like on that farm, though. It wasn't good. It was a hot summer, and the accommodation we had was very basic. The toilet was just an earth pit in the middle of the farmyard. There was no flush or anything like that. And it stank on a hot day. And there were flies buzzing around. And not only that, what made it worse is the farmer, when he killed a chicken, he would hang it up outside the toilet with blood dripping. It was appalling, revolting. I was glad to be coming back into Plymouth in the autumn. And, well, my father had managed to find another house that hadn't been damaged, that was standing empty. So that was requisitioned for us, and we went into that house. And again, there were sometimes air raids, and we were in the Anderson shelter. And I remember one day, it wasn't a whistle of a bomb coming down, it was a great roaring sound, and then a most enormous explosion. Well, the next day we looked, and the house next door had been blown up, it was gone. And the man who lived there was killed. And I went up to my room, and there was a big triangle of glass embedded in my mattress. Good job I've been in the air raid shelter, isn't it? Now, what I can tell you is, does anyone know where the Astor playing field is? You know the Astor playing field? Well, there was a barrage balloon belonging to the Royal Air Force, and its nickname was Hector, for whatever reason. Now, this barrage balloon, it went up when there was going to be an air raid from the Germans to make sure they didn't fly down too low. And this cry would come up around Plymouth, Hector's going up, and it often came before we heard the air raid siren, like the one you can hear next door. And when we heard that, we went to our shelters, because that was often the first sign something was coming. Hector's going up! The cry would come. We got to our Anderson shelters. There were 2 occasions, I remember, when I actually saw a German bomber brought down. Because most of the time I would have been in the shelter, so I wouldn't have seen anything. But the first time it was at night, and I saw it burning bright in the sky, and it was going down towards the east, towards Plymstock, and I think I heard it came down near Ivy Bridge. Now the other occasion was over Plymouth Sound, because down on the, down beyond the home were all the gun batteries. And they were firing on the German bombers when there was an air raid, and pelting it with shells. And on this other particular occasion, this air raid, well, I saw this plane, and it was burning, and coming down, and this was in broad daylight. It had tried to do a daytime raid, and there was blue and black smoke pouring out of its engines, and it went down over the breakwater. Now, I'll tell you, those two occasions, what I remember more than anything is the sound, not just of the engines, but of the people of Plymouth cheering. It was like they were clapping and cheering, just like Plymouth Argyle scoring at home, except the clapping went on for much longer, and it was much, much louder.
Hello everyone, my name is Frida Mary Lodge, and I was born here in Plymouth at Manmead, one of 3 children. I was in the middle. This is my brother Douglas here, 3 years younger than me, and I had a sister Joan who was 10 years older than me. And we all lived happily together at Plymouth. However, during the Blitz there were some scary nights.
Oh.
And a lot of the people of Plymouth used to go up onto Dartmoor at night, didn't they? Anyway, we were lucky enough to have a car, and one night Father said to us, let's all get in the car and go up onto Dartmoor so we can be safe. So we all loaded into the car, and there was no moon. It was a black night.
You couldn't have lights on the car either.
That's right, we had shutters on the headlights so that they couldn't be seen from up there. And we drove up onto Dartmoor along these windy country lanes.
Can you imagine how dark and mysterious?
And then we had to turn right, and then in the distance we saw a kind of clearing with a copse of trees with lots of other people camped out, weren't
they?
they?
Had the same idea, didn't they?
They did.
Get out of the city.
That's right, and then Father turned the steering wheel really sharply and
into a ditch.
Into a ditch. Well, of course, as children, we thought this was hilarious. And then all the people came over and helped us push and heave the car out of the ditch. And we were fine, but of course, we were too excited. We didn't get any sleep at all after that. And do you know what happened? There wasn't even an air raid.
No air raid that night.
Which is a good thing, but we never bothered again. We stayed down in Plymouth and we went to the public air raid shelters instead, didn't we?
That's right, they were packed in as well, weren't they?
They were packed in, but at least we were safer, weren't we?
Absolutely, but it's, you know, we had to keep our spirits up in the air raid shelter. What I do remember, there was a particular occasion. Do you know who was the mayor, or should I say the mayoress of Plymouth during World War II?
I remember her name.
Nancy Astor.
That's
You got
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's American, wasn't she? And she was quite a character. And she came in to the air raid shelter when we were there.
She made us laugh, didn't she?
You know, in her smart clothes. Yeah. And to cheer up all the children in the air raid shelter, you never guess what she did. She hitched up her skirts and she turned cartwheels all up the air raid shelter. And then she turned round and did somersaults back down the other way.
And we just thought
she wasn't a young woman. She wasn't a young woman.
And it really lifted everybody's spirits. But that's not all she did. She also did broadcasts on the wireless to the people of the area to try and keep our morale strong.
That's right.
And I've actually got the words here of one of her broadcasts. I'd like to read them to you if that's all right.
Just try and do it in an American accent.
Well, I'll give it a go. Lady Nancy Astor, this is the broadcast she sent to the people of Plymouth. Today, Plymouth knows the meaning of total war. Mercifully, we have suffered only half of what Hitler's other victims have suffered. At least we have not been driven out of our country. Our sailors, soldiers and airmen will see that we never are. So that's what she said, Lady Nancy Astor, and that gave us a bit of hope, didn't it really?
I suppose it did.
And another thing we used to do during the war, there were some allied forces from other countries and we were encouraged to invite them round and make them feel welcome. Well, the first couple we invited round was a French couple. And Mother got hold of a phrase book to help translate, and she found this phrase which translated from French to English as, "The Lord helps them that help themselves." So this is what she used over the tea table. And they were nice young men, weren't they? Lucian and Jean. And Lucian really liked me. I was only a little girl at the time, and he was ever so kind. And he gave me a ring. I remember it now. He gave me a shiny ring, and it had the first letter of my middle name engraved on it, M for Mary. And he gave it to me, and he looked at I had lovely long fingers then, and he said, "You'll be a famous pianist one day." But of course that never happened. But I'll never forget that. That
And then there
really
were the
touched
Spanish.
my heart.
The Spanish.
The Spanish, that's right. They were lovely as well.
The thing is, you want to remember that during the Second World War, so many different nationalities came to Plymouth.
Yeah, it was
They
lovely.
were the refugees, but then, like you say, Free French Army, lots of soldiers fighting. Became very cosmopolitan city for that short time.
Yeah, and then this Elio, this Spanish man, well, of course we were children like you two, and he gave us a pack of cards. And on the back of the pack of cards, there was a picture. Do you remember
Spanish
what it was?
galleons,
It was a Spanish galleon, and we found that so exciting. We played with these playing cards all the time, didn't we? That was lovely. And then, just before the war, Dad had bought a 9.5mm camera, movie camera, to take film of the family. So that was lovely, but at the same time, he also used to show us films, didn't he? Silent movies, black and white movies. And we had an idea that it might be a nice thing to take some of these films up to the Indian camp at Marsh Mills. And there was that lovely Indian soldier, what was his name? Hedisha, that's right. And we were friendly with him and we made this suggestion and he said, oh yes, please come and show these films to the soldiers. So they invited us up there and they got this room all ready for us. There were 2 officers there and they had this brazier in there because it was winter and cold. And the brazier had coke inside to make a nice fire to keep us warm. Now usually these braziers were outside in the street to keep the road workers warm because they gave off loads of fumes and smoke. So in this room where we were with Mother, she couldn't stop coughing. And so they were really kind and they put the brazier outside, so we were a bit cold, but it didn't matter. And we showed the film and they really loved it. It was really popular. It was Bonzo and Popeye.
Popeye.
Do any of you know Popeye? That's been popular a long time, yes.
And Charlie Chaplin.
And Charlie Chaplin, that's right. And we were invited back again and again to show these films to the Indian soldiers over at Marsh Mills.
You only do silent movies, though.
Yeah, they were silent. Well, that was good, because then there was no language
problem. But the films that I
problem.
like most of all, the talkies had come in just before the war, and even colour. And my favourite film from that period, which you might know, is a film with Judy Garland, who's singing in it. Do you know The Wizard of Oz? You do know it! You see, you still know it. And that was our favourite song, wasn't it, when we were your age?
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I've heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh why can't I? Hello everyone, my name is Bubbles and I was a wren during the war, stationed here in Plymouth. And one night I was walking home in the dark, and it was very dark, and this American Jeep pulled up alongside me, and the young man, the young GI, he leaned out and he said to me,
"Do you want a lift?"
And I said, "Oh, yes, please." And he took me home, and then we arranged to go out for a drink the following night. And 3 days later, we were in love. A little while after that, it was my birthday, and he had a birthday cake made for me, and on the top he had something really special written.
"Happy birthday, Bubbles. I love you."
So I was really, really pleased with that. Anyway, his name was Tony, and Tony was stationed with the 1st American Army at Marsh Mills, and he was a lovely man, and it didn't take very long for our relationship relationship to become very strong. However, 3 weeks after we started going out together, I received a letter from him saying that his company was actually being sent to France. And a week later, I received another letter from him, actually written on the boat, on the way over to France, and he said he could hear explosions in the distance. And that was the last time I ever heard from him. I heard that his whole company was wiped out. However, 9 months after that, I gave birth to a little boy, and I called him Tony after his father. And of course, the memory lives on. Underneath the lantern by the barrack gate, darling, I remember the way you used to wait. 'Twas there that you'd whisper tenderly that you loved me, you'd always be my lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marley. Time would come for roll call, time for us to part. Darling, I'd caress you and press you to my heart, and then neath that far-off lantern light, I'd hold you tight, we'd kiss goodnight. My lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marley.
Orders came for sailing somewhere over there, all confined to barracks was more than I could bear. I knew you were waiting in the street, I heard your feet, but could not meet. My lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marley. Resting in our billets just behind the lines, even though we're parted, your lips are close to mine. You wait where that lantern softly gleams, your sweet face seems to haunt my dreams. My lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marley. My lily of the lamplight.